At 17, my first job was working at a local Walmart so I could save up to have money to move out. I was so enamored with the idea of freedom that I would bend over backwards for the job, and they knew it. After I had been there for a few weeks, I made a few friends, and things seemed to be going rather smoothly. About a month in, they introduced a new guy. He was a transfer, and for the night shift, he was going to be with me as I showed him the layout of the store. He seemed nice enough, even if he was quiet. I just figured it was just that he was shy. However, as he was there longer, I just couldn't get a read on what his deal was. Besides the typical work-related things, he barely said a word. Instead, he handled his job and left. Don't get me wrong, that's fine. He's there to pay bills, not make friends. But this was extreme. If someone walked into the break room while he was there, he left. Eventually, I just left it alone and carried on with my work. That seemed fine until he did something one day that really unnerved me, and I couldn't be quiet about it. On that day, I'd been scheduled to work the evening shift from 3 to 11. I was meant to be stocking aisles along with the guy, and we got to it. He was moving quickly and efficiently, so I had no complaints. By 9 that night, we had finished stocking most of the aisles, except for the toddler clothing and toy aisles. His suggestion was we divide it up. He would go to one section, and I'd go the other way. If one of us finished before the other, then we'd go help the one who wasn't completed. Personally, as long as the job got done, I didn't care. I agreed. I stayed in the toddler section while he moved to the toys. It was after an hour or two that I had successfully finished up my end and took a mini break to get a drink and set out to find him. I found him, but he wasn't working. As I rounded the corner, I saw a mom and her daughter. The little girl looked around 5 or 6. She was holding a plastic horse figurine and inspecting it like she was about to hand it a medal. She was precious in pigtails and a little flower-printed dress. Her mother made a comment about looking for a present for a birthday party they were meant to attend the next day. Still, I didn't think much about it until I saw something at the far end of the aisle the two ladies were in. Looking closer, I saw my coworker's face leering from around the corner. Not his body, just his face. He was actively hiding his body behind the metal end of the aisle, just sneaking a peek while he thought the two were occupied. I was appalled at what I was witnessing playing out. The way that he was looming unannounced creeped me out more than I care to admit. I continued to stare at the two for a couple more seconds until an elderly man tapped me on the shoulder and I almost jumped out of my skin. Struggling to look away from my coworker, I finally managed to turn around and see the elderly gentleman. He was looking for where he could find extension cords. Annoyed, I pointed him in the direction, but he insisted he look there. Without being able to find anyone else, I went to quickly escort the man, even as he struggled to keep pace. When I made it, I pointed them out and turned on my heels and headed right back to where I was. I glanced around and, to my relief, the duo was gone, along with said coworker. I breathed a sigh of relief and figured the two just left. I was wrong. Not long after, I heard the intercom come on overhead. They were announcing the descriptions of a little girl in a flowered dress with her hair up in pigtails. Horrified, I ran to the customer service desk and found the mother hysterical. She was explaining that she and her daughter left the toy section. The daughter was walking behind her. It wasn't until she reached another aisle that she realized her daughter's footsteps had stopped completely. When she turned, her daughter wasn't there. She looked through the closest sections to no avail, and when she panicked, she ran to customer service. I didn't even wait to be included in the conversation. I just butted in. My voice was shaking as I described the situation and how I was watching from a distance, but a customer distracted me. I told my boss who the worker was. By then, security had also been notified, and cops were called. We sat there in a frenzy before we all branched out in different directions. Security went towards the back rooms, and I went towards the parking lot. I figured that if anything, the goal would be to get away, right? I looked in every door I passed headed outside with no luck. Outside, other cars were parked as well. I had no clue where to look. Then, I heard a squeal. I spun in a circle, finding two figures running to the back of the garden lot. I realized to my horror I forgot the walkie-talkie, and had to make the decision to chase them myself. Thankfully, I didn't have to go far. I turned the corner and saw both of them standing near a beat-up truck. He was handing her a toy. I stepped out into the light and, without even realizing it, demanded the girl to come to me. I guess I spooked him or something, because she was at my side before he had a chance to snatch her up. I held my breath as I tried to think of my next move. I knew that I didn't want her to get near him again, and from where I was, I knew that people were looking for her. Taking a chance, I told her to run inside and go to the front of the store and find an employee or customer service. She had tears in her eyes as she nodded and took off. I watched as he twitched as if he was going to follow, and I prepared myself to have to tackle him. He didn't move though. He stared at me. I swore he snarled as he ran at me. Fortunately for me, I wasn't completely clueless with self-defense. I grew up with mostly male cousins, and I knew how to fight from growing up and wrestling with the boys. Still, his body weight slamming into me was a jolt. I don't remember most of what happened since adrenaline kicked in, but I remember abruptly feeling weight being shifted. I saw an officer throw my coworker off me before proceeding to wrestle him onto his stomach. Another officer came up and helped me stand before offering medics, but I was okay. Once back inside, the officer spoke to everyone and updated us. It wasn't but 2 days later when the boss found out he had failed to register on a certain list and was now booked for parole violations, including having a pistol in his car. It was the one situation that has made it nearly impossible to go out alone with my own children after dark now. When I was 19, I started working at Walmart full-time. The job itself isn't too difficult. I basically ring people up all day, run returns, and on occasion have to man the front door to check receipts. It's easy, but so many customers were jerks who love to come in just to argue with you. But it's retail. It sucks, but it's a job. When I first started, I used to work the closing shift. This meant that we had a lot of crazy customers coming in late at night, and honestly, I can go on and on about the different things I've seen. But I'll start by just telling you about one of the scariest ones. One night, around 9 p.m., I was on the register, waiting for the clock to move faster so I could have my last break. As I turned my light off to go to said break, a customer hurried on my line and asked if I could take one more customer since he had a small basket. I was annoyed but didn't want to argue and told him yes. At first, things were okay. We exchanged greetings and he seemed cool. The man wasn't much taller than me, but he was muscular and had to be at least 10 years older, but he seemed harmless otherwise. But then he started asking me personal questions that struck me as odd. They started small, like did I go to school? I didn't. Then he asked me where I was from, since my accent was different. I told him I was from New York. But then he asked me a question that seemed innocent, if it weren't for the interest in his eyes. He asked me, "When do you get off tonight?" I paused at that question and got instantly nervous. I remember stuttering out, "Late?" and not elaborating because I didn't like the turn the questions were taking. He then asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I told him yes, even though I didn't, hoping I could scare him off. But he just smirked and looked around us before whispering, "Well, I don't see him here now." Anxious to get away from the older man, I told him his total and waited for him to pay, ignoring the way he started to look at my chest and body like he was inspecting something. He didn't go to pay, but by some stroke of luck, my manager came at that moment and asked why I hadn't left to break yet. I gave my manager one look before she understood that I was uncomfortable with the man and told me to go to break while she finished the transaction. The man tried to argue, but my manager talked over him and told him his total. I didn't look back when I scurried away, but I felt his eyes on me until I got out of sight. I wish I could say that's where the story ended, but it didn't. I remember coming back from my break and looking around to see if that man was still there. He wasn't, and I felt like I could breathe. I all but forgot about the event and focused on just ringing people up until it was about an hour later. The lines had slowed by then, so I was wandering around my register, grabbing things people left behind, when a sweet-looking older woman came up with one of the work scooters. She was extremely sweet and pleasant, and I enjoyed talking to her for 10 minutes about anything and everything. She told me about her cats, I told her about me applying to college, and overall, it was a nice conversation. When I bagged her last item and she had paid, she asked me if I could help her to her car, since she had a big case of water and couldn't lift heavy things anymore. And even though it was late and the parking lot was scary at night, I didn't want to let that sweet woman struggle by herself. I did try to see if there were any guys or cart pushers who could help her, but late at night they had all gone home. So I turned my register light off and told her I'd meet her at the doors in a moment after I finished ringing up my last customer in line. She thanked me over and over, and I felt better about my decision to go to the parking lot late at night. After my last customer, I walked to the doors, and when I saw the woman, the smile on my face instantly fell, and my heart started rapidly beating against my chest in true fear. The man from earlier, who I thought had left, was with the lady at the exit doors. The lady was no longer smiling sweetly and was aggressively whispering to the man. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard, "Get in the car and wait!" and instantly knew I should not go out into the parking lot with her. I took a couple steps back, and when she saw me, the old woman's face fell before she looked between the man and me. I didn't wait around and hurried back inside and told my manager everything. She managed to calm me down, and she called the police to write a report, but the woman and the man had long since left. There was nothing the police could do unless they came back. I left earlier than I was supposed to that night and changed my schedule to only morning shifts the next day. And considering how scared I was, my store manager approved it without argument. I still work at the same Walmart, and although I haven't seen the same man and woman again, I do have other scary encounters with other customers. I wish I could quit, but with the economy right now, it's just not that simple. As I was a poor college student, I worked as many hours as I could to help pay for school. Unfortunately, this meant that the only place I could get groceries and other necessary supplies was the local Walmart. It's not so bad during the day when you have tons of people there, but at night, when everyone is safely tucked into bed behind locked doors, it was arguably the creepiest place in town. Normally, I would go in and get what I needed and get out. But one night, I had several things to do, so it was late before I got to the store. This was back in the pre-COVID days, when Walmart was open 24 hours a day. I didn't even see any employees when I entered, which sent a chill up my spine. However, as time passed and I collected my items, the more I relaxed. I had always had an active imagination, so it wasn't unusual for me to jump at unknown noises and sights. I was maybe 3/4 of the way through my list when I got the odd sense that I was being followed. When I looked over my shoulder, I saw that nobody was there. Thinking it was my overactive imagination, I ignored it. Some 20 minutes later, the feeling came over me again, so when I looked again, I saw that again nobody was there. Thinking that I needed some coffee, I walked towards the front where the 24-hour McDonald's was selling coffee. I was halfway there when I felt the sensation that I was being followed again. When I turned to look, again nobody was there. Now seriously spooked, I picked up speed and ran towards the front where I got some coffee and a large fry. While I was waiting for my fry and my coffee, I heard the squeaky PA system call out for an employee. This made me feel a little bit better, knowing that at least there was somebody out there. I took my coffee and my fry and continued to shop. I had finished getting the last of my things when I felt the odd sensation that I was being followed again. Now, fed up, I snapped my head around, ready to give whoever it was that was stalking me a piece of my mind. Standing at the end of the aisle and staring at me was a clown. No, I'm not making this up. It was like the ones that were on the news a few years ago during the creepy clown scares. His face was caked with white makeup, and he wore a red wig that puffed out like a balloon. He was also wearing a yellow clown costume. I just stood there and stared at this creep. He took one step towards me. Grabbing my bag and abandoning my cart laden with items, I took off running. I didn't stop until I was in my car. Even then, I put the pedal to the metal and sped off towards home. I didn't feel safe until I was safe behind a locked door and safely tucked in bed. I was so rattled that I didn't tell anyone for a couple of days. That was until I was watching the news and saw something that made my blood run cold with fear. A Walmart employee was followed home and attacked by some creep in a clown costume. Wondering if there was some sort of connection, I called the police tip line and let them know about my scare. Apparently, my tip had caused something of a stir because I was asked to come in for a formal interview. I went in and told them everything that I knew. When I asked why they were so curious about my lead, they disclosed something that hadn't been revealed to the public yet. During the initial search of the store, police found a yellow clown costume not far from where the employee was attacked. When I was shown the clown costume, I positively identified it as the same one the creep that was stalking me was wearing. Not long after, they caught the perpetrator. It turned out the guy had a history of stalking girls like myself and the Walmart employee that he ended up attacking. Police theorized that I was his intended target that night, but when I took off running, he decided to stalk someone else. The poor girl just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's been over 10 years since this whole ordeal happened, and I have still never stepped foot inside a Walmart since then. It took me a long time to get over the guilt I felt about that poor girl who was attacked instead of me that night. I still have nightmares about being stalked by that creep in the yellow clown costume.